This is a quick concept video about a core ecological unit, the community. Hi folks, I'm Tarn. I'm a PhD candidate in ecology, and I'm here to help you make connections between environmental science and environmental issues that you actually care about. A community is a group of organisms of different species together in space and time. The first thing to keep in mind is that this is a group of organisms. This is more than one individual. The second important point is that it's made up of different species. So if you have only one species, what you're talking about is a population. If you have two or more species, you're talking about a community. This requirement of having more than one species is what separates a population from a community. Being together in space just means they have to be close together physically, close enough together that there's some potential for them to interact. Being together in time matters because if you and I were going to have an interaction at a coffee shop, we don't just have to make sure we're at the same coffee shop, we have to make sure we're at the same coffee shop at the same time for that interaction to take place. Now, this can come up in different ways when we're asking different kinds of questions. So sometimes if two species occupy the same region but only in different seasons, that may make it not useful for thinking about a community, but it depends on the question. Like with populations and ecosystems, how much space or how much time is relevant depends on the question we're asking. So you could ask a question about the community of microbes, right? Little bacteria living in the gut of a single ant, because you've got a spatial constraint, right? They're limited in space by the boundaries of this ant's gut. You have more than one individual and you have more than one species, and they're together, sharing the lifespan of this ant together in time. But you could scale up from there, right? And you could ask a question about all of the insects in a tree that this ant is a part of, right? So suddenly this community that we were thinking about before of all these little microbes in an ant's gut is actually part of this even bigger community of all of the insects and fungi living in the canopy of a tree. And we can scale up the community question even further to talk about the whole forest that this tree is in. And so suddenly, we've got this like little nesting dolls of communities based on the scale that we're asking the question at. The gut of an ant to the canopy of a tree to an entire forest. Questions about communities can take a lot of different forms, but are mostly about how members of different species interact together. So when we're asking questions about predator and prey, that's a community question. When we're asking questions about flowers and pollinators, that's a community question. When we're asking questions about biodiversity, the number of different species and different ecological types that live in a region and interact, these are all community level questions. And it's at this scale that we can also start asking about deeper problems like the stability of an ecological system. How likely a community is to sustain itself long term, its ability to resist being disturbed and damaged. A lot of this happens at the community scale. And that's a big tie-in to why we, as people who care about environmental issues and environmental justice, start to really care about community questions. It is how stable are ecosystems and how do we make them more stable if they're damaged and vulnerable? It's asking questions about invasive species. It's asking questions about rewilding and restoring species to places that they've been lost from. And a number of what we think about as ecological services emerge from things that are happening at a community scale. So if we are utilizing timber and plants for food and construction and all sorts of different traditional human ways of living, this comes out of what is the biodiversity of plant life in a forest or in a region. A lot of what is happening at a community scale matters a lot for human concerns. When we're interested in environmental issues, environmental justice, people being able to make a life in connection with the land, A lot of this comes out of how communities work, how stable they are, how productive they are, and a lot of the time, the sense of beauty that we see in a forest or a grassland comes out of biodiversity, productivity, and these community level questions. There we have it. So if you have any questions about communities or you think I missed something important, leave that down in the comments, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.